Hello, welcome back to BookSquirrel, and this is my individual book review for Iain M. Banks's Consider Phlebas. BookSquirrel. I don't know. Consider Phlebas is the first of 10 books in Iain M. Banks's Culture series, which focuses on a utopian society called the Culture. And it is the fifth book that I'm reviewing out of 20 sci-fi books from my Sci-Fi TBR tier list. As I typically do with my reviews, I'm going to be breaking down this book into 5 categories: my approach of the book's characters, offerings, readability, and narration. And then after giving my thoughts on each of those categories, I will be giving Consider Phlebas a final score out of 100 potential ACORNs. I made a change recently to take out category points, so the score that I give this book at the end is going to be more reflective of my overall experience with it. Now, before I get into the book, I do want to go over some details of it. Consider Phlebas is 514 pages long and was originally published in 1987. The version that I have was originally published this year. And here is the blurb. War rages across the galaxy. Billions have died. Billions more are doomed. Moons, planets, the very stars themselves face cold-blooded, brutal destruction. The adherents fight for their faith. The culture for its moral right to exist. Principles are at stake. There can be no surrender. Within this cosmic conflict, a crucial battle of wits is waged. Deep within a fabled labyrinth, on a planet of the dead forbidden to mortals, lies a fugitive mind. Both the culture and the adherents desperately seek it. It is the fate of Horza, the Changer, and his motley crew of unpredictable mercenaries, human and machine, to actually find it, and with it, their own destruction. So before I get into the book, I really want to tell you this story about a time when I literally had half of a toothpick wedged in my foot for a whole week. Sorry, I know you didn't come here for a medical story, but I wanted to tell you this. So, I was actually home alone when it happened. I am not a person who uses toothpicks, and I thought to myself, I kind of want to be someone who uses toothpicks. I like the idea of a toothpick. I tend to get my finger just all in there, and I'm like, a toothpick just seems not only classier, but kind of, I don't know, something attractive about having a toothpick and being the toothpick guy. I don't know, maybe that sounds really dorky. So I literally, the night before, had used my first toothpick in years. And I guess I didn't throw it away because I had just instead put it on the coffee table. Gross, sure. I mean, I'm kind of gross. And I was just kind of sidestepping between the couch and the coffee table. I was kind of sidestepping. And what I did was, with my right foot, I stepped on the toothpick facing this way, so it caused it to stick up. And then shuffling with my left foot, I effectively caused the conditions to impale my foot with a toothpick. I felt it. I panicked. I fell back. Thankfully, the couch was right there. I fell back onto the couch. I looked, and I saw the toothpick there sticking out of my foot, and I went to pull it out, and it broke, and the half that was already out detached from the half that was in. And it was probably because I was in a panic, and I didn't do it as precisely or as carefully as I should have. But it freaked me out. I was home alone. I called my partner. I stepped on a toothpick, just stabbed my foot with a toothpick on accident, and we went to urgent care. I was in the urgent care. My mind was kind of in denial, though. I was like, is there a possibility that it's not in my foot? I was not walking on that foot, but my brain was like, you don't really want to accept the fact that there's a toothpick right now buried in your foot, so maybe it's not there. That was the first mistake, is I told them it may or may not be there. So what did they do? Well, they gave me an x-ray. They couldn't find a toothpick on the x-ray. Come to find out, it's very hard to spot wood on an x-ray. But that's what they tried to do, and they were the experts. That was their first mistake. Then one of the medical practitioners that was there decided that they were going to try to go into my foot and try to see if they couldn't find it and pull it out. Well, they couldn't. And they thought that the trajectory of it was different than what it was. Because, you normally don't shift into this kind of wound, right? You normally step on sharp things. And so it's normally more up than sideways. And so she was like, I don't think it's there. And I'm like, I'm in a lot of pain still. I would like to, I think it is, but I'm not sure. And I should have just been like, it's there. I was given probably the worst medical advice ever by this practitioner, which was, these things have a way of working their way out of the body. She also told me to contact a podiatrist. Okay. Now, I was already in the mindset that this practitioner didn't really know what they were doing. And on top of that, the room that I was in was constantly being visited by random nurses to get medical supplies. Even though it was like an actual patient room, I'm like, why are your medical supplies being stored here and not in like a medical closet? And so I started to just have this idea that maybe we went to an inept urgent care. Also, I was very ignorant as to what podiatrists actually did. So I figured like a foot doctor, like what, it's not a wart. And I didn't realize that podiatrists are, foot surgeons on top of it, right? I didn't realize that. Since she had given me that horrible advice that in time these things tend to work their way out of the body, that's what I did. I waited. And in the meanwhile, I'm online, I'm researching, and I'm finding out, when you have a foreign object in your body that's made out of biodegradable materials, they will degrade and likely cause an infection. Well, I was feeling some pain in my foot. I was still not walking on it. We bought me some cheap crutches to maneuver around the house with. I started giving my foot little medical baths to help ease the pain. Little did I know that the water that I was soaking my foot in was actually being absorbed by the toothpick and making the situation worse. And almost a week later, I was at my wit's end. I was crying in pain in bed. So we went to the emergency room. And while I'm there, the medical practitioner said, okay, well, toothpick's probably not going to show up on x-ray. Let's do an ultrasound. So they put some jelly on it and the device, and they were looking around and applying pressure to the area where it was, which was causing me pain. Oh, but they weren't finding it on the ultrasound. They could not detect this object that was in my foot. And by this point, I'm saying, well, I know it's there. I'm no longer in denial. My foot has gotten worse over the span of a week. It's definitely there. They go, yeah, you need to schedule an appointment with a podiatrist. And I'm like, is there not a podiatrist here? Like, what can we do anything about this? They said, well, we'll refer you and then, schedule an appointment. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to prescribe you hydrocodone. I had a family member who was addicted to oxycodone, and this is a very similar drug, very addictive substance. I was scared to take it. I said, is that really necessary? And they were like, well, if it is actually for pain, it shouldn't be addictive. And I'm like, okay, fine. It's my fault that I didn't reach out to a podiatrist earlier. It's my fault that I didn't really think the urgent care I went to was very capable. It is my fault that I didn't follow through on these things, right? They send me home with the toothpick still in my foot, but with some addictive painkillers. Great. And they say, come back if you start having a fever. So all of a sudden it was, okay, I'm going to take my temperature every half hour. I'm going to be popping these pills as much as they allow me to. And sure enough, a few hours later, I had a fever. And by this point, the entire bottom of my foot was infected. So went back to the emergency room. And unfortunately, the moment I get back, my fever has reduced to the point where it's no longer a fever anymore. And they said, your body does show some signs that it is recently recovering from a fever. So we trust you. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually admit you into the hospital. And, we're going to try to get you seen. Great. They put me in the hospital. What does the hospital do? First thing they do, more x-rays. More x-rays. Okay, I know I'm going to be charged for this, even though I already know that this is not going to find the toothpick. Then I have a doctor come in and say, do you have a history with diabetes? And I say, no, not that I'm aware of. I don't think I have diabetes. And he's like, okay. They take blood work. A second doctor comes in. Do you know if you have diabetes? And I'm like, I don't think I have diabetes. I do have a toothpick in my foot that's been there for a week. But because they couldn't see it on the x-ray, none of the doctors believed me. Finally, I get seen by the podiatrist and she rushes me into surgery. Okay. And before you go into surgery, you have to prove that you're lucid. I think it's for the anesthesia. So what do? They ask you, why are you getting surgery? and you have to repeat back to them the purpose of your surgery. Now, on the sheet that I also had to sign, it said that the reason for my surgery was to drain the infection in my foot. Didn't mention a toothpick. So when they asked me, why are you getting your surgery? I said, first and foremost, to have this toothpick removed from my foot. And then on top of that, I'm having the infection drained from my foot. The podiatrist shows up. I tell her, there is a toothpick in my foot. That's the cause of this. And I tell her the orientation of the toothpick. And I say, this is how it happened. So this is the trajectory of the toothpick. She was the best. They put me under. I wake up. The surgery's done. A doctor comes in and goes, well, looks like they found a toothpick in your foot. And then it also says, do you have a history with diabetes? And so at this point I was frustrated and I said to him, you're the one who's been taking my lab work. Can you tell me if I have diabetes? He goes, sure. So then he goes over to the computer, clickety clackety clickety a little bit, and he finds out, oh yeah, you don't have diabetes. Thank you. At least now I have a definitive answer. Why are 3 different doctors, all male by the way, all very expensively dressed, walking in like they don't care at all about me. They just want to assume I have diabetes. And it's just so, it was so inept. It was so annoying. And I'm like, and you're making bank to what? Misdiagnosed me as having diabetes without looking at my chart. One of the nurses came in later and I said, I've had 3 different doctors come up to me and ask me if I have diabetes. And the nurse instantly said, you're not even pre-diabetic. I'm like, why couldn't the doctors have asked the nurses who were familiar with my case? What is going on here? That one podiatrist, she did an amazing job with my foot. I'm fully recovered, but I feel like she was the saving grace of the whole situation. She took out the toothpick, she drained the infection, she saved the moment, and I finally was able to move on with my life with a massive bill that then forced me to file for bankruptcy. But that's another story. I know that's a really long story, and I know that you came here for a book review on Consider Phlebas, which I did finish this morning. I'm just letting you know that the experience you're going to have with this book is the same experience that you had with this review. You clicked on it thinking it was one thing. You got a huge story of ineptitude and discomfort and frustration that had nothing to do with what you were promised. And I'm here to tell you it's because the entire purpose of this book is that it is irrelevant. That what you want is not necessarily what you're going to get.
Well, what you want to do is not necessarily what you're going to do.
And even if it's being promised by the author himself that this is what you're going to be reading, it's all irrelevant in the end. My approach to this book was amazing. I feel the promises that were created in this book were really cool. The characters, the offerings, and the narration all follow the same path of presenting interesting things that then don't go anywhere. The goalposts are constantly pushed back. The climax, it's about 70 pages long. And in the end, you find out that not a single thing in this book matters. There's a cute little synopsis of the entire war that this book is about. The story of this book happens towards the beginning of that war. And in the entire synopsis, none of the actual war itself is impacted by what happens in this book. So not only are the promises not delivered, but in the end, nothing matters. And it's all because this is called Consider Phlebas, which is based off of a T.S. Eliot poem called The Wasteland, in which he evokes a sailor named Phlebas, who is now dead at the bottom of the sea and ravaged by the current. And he says to all of the sailors still on the water, consider Phlebas. He was once as tall and handsome as you. This whole thing is one big contemplation on irrelevancy, and not once is irrelevancy spoken about as a concept in the actual text. And yet that's the point of this book, because none of it matters. None of it matters. I literally recorded an entire review going over my approach, my characters, my offerings, the readability, and the narration. And in the end, I was like, no, I'm going to tell them a story about when I got a toothpick at my foot, because at least that will be more interesting. I wanted to DNF this book really bad towards the end, towards the 90% mark, but I pushed through for one reason, and that is because I went into this book knowing that this is not indicative of the rest of the series. I was told that from the beginning. If you didn't know anything about this series, then you read this first book, 500 pages of it, and you didn't know that the rest of the series was different, I don't see how many people would continue with this. Read it if you want. Come to your own conclusions. If this is interesting to you, please go down that path yourself. So because I didn't actually DNF it, I have to give it at least 50 out of 100 acorns. That's just my own rule. But I really wanted to DNF it. 60 acorns is about a 1-star for me. 70 is about a 2-star, 80 is about a 3-star, 90 a 4-star. I would give this a 1-star, but I don't even think it's worth a full star in my opinion. So I am going to consider Phlebas and give it a 55 out of 100. I think that's about where it ended up for me. It's the worst score that I've given on this channel, and it's not like it's written poorly. It's not like it's super high in triggers. It's just a whole allegory about how pointless it is to think you're important. And even that I had to get from researching the concept of Phlebas after the fact. So I'm sorry I didn't really go over all of the 5 different categories that I normally do with my reviews. As I said, I did record those and I just didn't find them to be that interesting. And in the end, I felt like I could do a bit that showed you the experience of this book before reading it. So all right, so that's that. My next video on this channel will be my November wrap-up to go over the different books that I read in November. And then after that, I will be reading Salem's Lot. Hope you look forward for that. And until then, hey, what are you reading right now? Hope it's a good book. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful whatever. And until next time, BookSquirrel out. Bye. BookSquirrel. I don't know.